Hello everyone, it's Miss Faye and today we're going to be covering cell organelles and structures. By the end of today's lesson, you should be able to cover the following learning targets. Now, we all know that cells are the basic unit of life, which means that every living organism is made up of at least one cell. Within these cells, there are tiny structures known as organelles, and each one of these organelles is specialized to perform a specific function for that cell. Without these organelles, the cell would not be able to stay alive because each one of these organelles is performing some form of essential function. Today, we're going to be going through these organelles, and a good way to remember them is to group them by similar functions. So that's how I'm going to be going through each set of organelles with you today. So the first set of organelles are organelles that provide support and movement for the cells. So this includes the cytoskeleton, the cytoplasm, cilia, and flagella. The cytoskeleton is a network of proteins made up from microtubules, microfilaments, and intermediate filaments. Now, if you look at these different types of proteins that make up the cytoskeleton, you will notice that they have different structures. Now, whenever something has a different structure or a specialized structure, this usually will represent its specialized function. So structure always reflects function when we are discussing concepts in biology. So right away we notice that these proteins, whether it be the microtubules and the microfilaments, they differ in their shape. Microtubules are a lot larger, microfilaments are a lot finer. But both of them kind of work together in order to support the cell, to give it its shape, and help it move and divide. The cytoplasm is a clear jelly-like material that fills up the cell, and the main purpose of the cytoplasm is to provide the cell with structure, but also to hold the organelles in place and allow them to move freely. Now, the cytoplasm is made up of mostly water, and this is very important and very significant. We already know that water is a polar molecule, so if the cytoplasm is mostly water, this means that it will be able to dissolve other polar substances. So really important nutrients, vitamins, and reactants will be able to dissolve in the cytoplasm, and this allows chemical reactions to happen. If things can dissolve in the cytoplasm, then they can be used up by the cell to allow these chemical reactions that are essential to keeping the cell alive to happen. So again, this is an example of how the structure of the cytoplasm, in other words, it being made from mostly water, is important and reflects its function, which is allowing chemical reactions to happen and holding organelles, maintaining cell structure. The next group of specialized organelles are cilia and flagella. And you will not find these organelles everywhere. You will not find them in all cells. And that's why I say that they are specialized. Cilia look like hairs, so they're tiny hair-like structures that are found on certain types of cells, while flagella are these tail-like structures that are found in certain cells. So we'll find cilia around cells that are found in our respiratory system or respiratory tract, okay, such as the ciliated epithelial cell, which is found in your respiratory tract. And the main point of having these cilia is it allows movement, so it does provide the cells with the ability to move for some types of cells. But for other types of cells, the cilia is constantly moving, and in doing so, it traps and moves dust, mucus, and bacteria. So it plays a great role in maintaining or making sure that our respiratory tract is nice and clean and free from any dirt, bacteria, and other foreign particles. The flagella is found on some cells, such as the sperm cell over here, and the main purpose of the flagella is to allow the cell to move. It helps the cell to move, to propel itself through the body. The next group of organelles that we're going to be covering are the organelles that are involved in the process of making proteins, or a fancier way to say this is protein synthesis. So we know that proteins are one of the most diverse macromolecules found in living things. They are so important and they play such a crucial role in so many of the cell processes. And that's why it's so important for our cells to produce and to make proteins so that they can be used as enzymes, they can be used for building muscles, hair, skin. They can be used for the immune system, for immunity. So many different roles that they play in the body and in living organisms. The first organelle involved in the process of protein synthesis is the nucleus. The nucleus holds genetic information, which is DNA and RNA. And the DNA and later on the RNA are going to be the instructions for making these proteins that we are discussing right now. So just like if you were a chef in a kitchen and you're creating a new dish, you need some form of recipe. You need some form of instructions to work based on. So once you have this recipe, once you have the instructions, you read the recipe, you gather all of your ingredients, and then you follow the recipe and you make your dish. Well, a similar thing happens in the cells during the process of protein synthesis. The DNA contains the instructions or the recipe for making proteins. And specifically, if we look at a strand of DNA, usually this DNA is going to be organized in a specialized structure known as the chromosome. On this chromosome, okay, so all on this chromosome, there are these regions that are known as genes, okay? And think of these genes as, again, the instructions or the letters that are found in the recipe. As the cell reads these instructions, which are found specifically on the genes, it is able to make the proteins. Now, like I said, you need ingredients. You can't just make a dish from thin air. You need some form of ingredients that you're going to be putting together. In the process of protein synthesis, these ingredients are known as ribosomes, which are another set of specialized organelles. And the main purpose of these organelles, ribosomes, is to make proteins. These ribosomes, these specialized ingredients for making proteins, are made in the center of the nucleus in this region known as the nucleolus. Okay, so the nucleolus is this purple sphere that you see here. It is the center of the nucleus, and its main role is to make these ribosomes. As these ribosomes are being made, they then leave the nucleus, okay, in order to be used in the next organelle to make the proteins. So you'll notice that the nucleus has not only one layer, so it has a membrane or a covering, but it doesn't just have one layer, it has two layers. In other words, it has a double membrane. So the membrane that is found around the nucleus is known as a nuclear membrane, and the cell has two of those membranes. Now, this is really essential, or this is really significant, because remember, the nucleus is carrying the super important genetic information in the form of DNA, which without DNA, the organism literally would not be able to exist. DNA makes the organisms themselves. So you need to really protect that stuff, right? You want to protect the DNA from foreign substances or harmful materials. So that's why we have this double layer here. It provides extra protection to make sure that the DNA is always safe. But you also don't want to block things from coming in and out, right? So for this reason, we will have these pores or holes on the nuclear membrane, which will still allow really important materials to come in and out of the nucleus. This is known as selective permeability. And one of these materials, like I mentioned, is the ribosomes. So they're made in the nucleolus and they travel through these pores so that they reach the next organelle, which is the endoplasmic reticulum. So the endoplasmic reticulum, as you can see, is another organelle that is found right next door to the nucleus. And look how the endoplasmic reticulum has two parts. The pink part, which is the rough endoplasmic reticulum, or the rough ER, and the smooth ER, which is shown in the yellow. Now, the rough ER is known as, or the reason why we say it's rough is because of its appearance. So notice that it has all of these tiny little dots on it. And these tiny little dots, you guessed it, are the ribosomes that came from the nucleus. So the nucleus makes the ribosomes, okay, right here, makes the ribosomes in the nucleolus. They leave through the nuclear pores, and then they attach themselves to the rough ER. The rough ER then uses these ribosomes in order to make proteins. So that's the main function of the rough ER. Since it has the ingredients for making proteins, it will be able to make the proteins for the cell. On the other hand, the smooth ER does not have any ribosome. It lacks ribosomes. So since it doesn't have the ingredients for making proteins, it can't make them. But the smooth ER is still super useful for the cell because it does things like making lipids, which are also super important, and it also plays a crucial role in detoxifying the body from harmful chemicals or harmful toxins. The last thing I want to talk about about the ER is its general shape. So if we look at the general structure of the ER, you'll notice that it's highly folded, right? It looks like a maze. And the reason why it has so many of these folds is to increase surface area, okay? If we were to take these folds and lay them flat, they would take up a lot more space than what we see here. But in order to conserve space, in other words, to increase surface area, the ER gets folded, okay? The ER is folded. Now, whenever we have folding in any structure that you see or any organelle that you see, the reason why this is done is in order to increase surface or area for allowing more reactions to happen. So if you fold, if there are these folds in the endoplasmic reticulum, there will be more space for making more proteins. So this is why the endoplasmic reticulum is highly folded, to increase surface area, to make more proteins. Now, once the proteins are made by the endoplasmic reticulum, they travel to the next organelle, which is the Golgi apparatus or the Golgi complex. Sometimes, it's called two different things. Now, right here, okay, so if you look at the endoplasmic reticulum, right next door, so somewhere around here, you will notice that there is the Golgi apparatus. The main function of the Golgi apparatus is to take these proteins that were made by the endoplasmic reticulum, process them, sort them, and make sure that they are ready for delivery. They need to be shipped. These proteins need to be shipped to other parts of the body and other parts of the cell so that they can be used. So before it ships them, it just makes sure they are ready for shipment. And once they're ready to be shipped, it places them in these small, you can see them here as these balls, okay, or these spheres. And these structures are known as vesicles. So basically, each one of these vesicles will be carrying protein so that it can travel to other parts of the cell or other parts of the body, and it can be used for, again, building muscle, building hair, making enzymes, etc. Notice that the Golgi apparatus is also highly folded. So based on what we discussed in the previous organelle, why do you think that the Golgi apparatus is highly folded? So the answer is, again, to increase surface area to allow more reactions. In this case, what are these reactions? What exactly is the Golgi doing? It's processing, sorting, and delivering proteins. So the Golgi apparatus is highly folded in order to increase surface area, to process, sort, and deliver proteins. So I already kind of discussed the vesicle. I said that this is where the Golgi apparatus, okay, these little circles or spheres, this is where the protein is going to be found. So this is the vesicle right here. You'll notice that it is found kind of, so this is a cell, and it's found kind of all around the cell. The vesicle, its main job is it's a transportation device. It carries materials, and these materials can be, so that they can be moved around the cell, but also outside of the cell. And vesicles, they contain a membrane around them, okay? So they have this cover or layer around them. Why do you think vesicles might contain a layer or a membrane. Remember, they're carrying really important stuff, right? They're carrying important materials that the cell needs. So you don't want anything bad to get to these materials. You don't want these materials to spill out. So for this reason, having a membrane means that they are getting protection. And in general, whenever any organelle has a membrane around it, the main function of that membrane is to provide protection, all right? To provide protection. The next set of organelles that we're going to be covering today are organelles that are involved in energy conversion, or in other words, all of these organelles that I'm going to be discussing next are organelles that are involved in making energy for the cell. The first organelle is the mitochondria, and its main job is to supply energy to the cell through a process known as cellular respiration. During cellular respiration, sugar is converted to a form of energy known as ATP. So right now, you don't really need to know what ATP is, okay? You don't need to know the details of what ATP is. All you need to know is if you see this molecule, ATP, it's an energy molecule, okay? It's a form of energy. So during this process of cellular respiration, the mitochondria takes the sugar that we eat through food and it converts it to usable energy that the cells can actually benefit from. All right, so basically you'll notice again that the mitochondria is highly folded. And again, the reason why it is highly folded is to increase surface area for more reactions. And in this case, to increase surface area for making more energy for the cell. Now, another thing that we need to talk about here is that depending on the part of the body that we're looking at, or depending on the type of cell, some cells will have more mitochondria than other cells. So cells that are more active, okay, and require more energy, such as our muscle cells, are going to have a lot more mitochondria in them than cells that are not as active. So, for example, the skin cells are not as active as our muscle cells, and for that reason, skin cells will not have as much mitochondria as our muscle cells. The next organelle is a chloroplast, and this organelle is only found in plant cells. We will not find chloroplast in animal cells. Now, chloroplasts are also involved in energy. Specifically, what they do is they take the energy from the sun, okay, solar energy, and they convert it into a glucose or a sugar molecule. So in other words, they are able to convert energy from the sun into food for the plants. And they do that through a process known as photosynthesis, converting sunlight into sugar, into plant food. Notice how the chloroplast, again, is folded and it has multiple layers, multiple membranes. Why is that? To increase surface area for making more sugar, making more food for the plant. Finally, we are going to go over miscellaneous organelles that didn't really fit underneath the categories that I discussed. So these are just other organelles that are just as important, but kind of don't belong in one category. The first one is a vacuole, and a vacuole is a fluid-filled sac or storage unit that is used for storing really important materials for the cell. So it will store pretty much everything, whether it be water, whether it be nutrients and vitamins, and it can also store waste. So instead of the waste being like circling around the cell and being gross, it will place it in a vacuole so that the cell can get rid of it later. Now, we will notice that if we look at an animal cell and a plant cell, look at the size of the vacuole in the animal cell and look at the size of the vacuole in a plant cell. What do you see? What do you notice? Okay. Right away, we can see that the vacuole is much, much larger in a plant cell than an animal cell. And this is really significant, okay? Why do you think the vacuole is a lot larger in plant cells than in animal cells? Let's kind of think about remember that one of the things that the vacuole stores is water, right? Who do you think is going to need more water? A plant cell or an animal cell? Well, obviously, plant cells need a lot more water to stay alive, and they have to store a lot more water. A plant can't go and get a cup of water or find some water to drink whenever it's thirsty. It has to store this water because it doesn't know if it's going to rain tomorrow. So for that reason, plants need larger vacuoles to store a lot more water, because they do need more water, and they also need to store a lot more of it because they can't just go and drink whenever they are thirsty. So vacuoles are larger in plants because plants require the storage of a lot more water than animal cells. Centrioles are the next organelles we're going to be talking about, and these are going to be made from these specialized proteins that we discussed at the beginning, microtubules. And the only thing you really need to know about centrioles is that they play a role in cell division. Next, we have lysosomes, and lysosomes are only found in animal cells. Lysosomes are specialized organelles, and they contain enzymes. They contain digestive enzymes. They're pretty tough, and I would not want to mess with a lysosome because the lysosomes contain these digestive enzymes, and they will literally break down and kill and digest anything they come into contact with. So they are like the soldiers of the cell. They kind of circle around the cell, and if they notice a bacteria or a virus or a dead part of the cell or something in the cell that is unneeded, it will go engulf it, take it in, and then use those digestive enzymes to kind of break it and dissolve it. So it is a pretty killer organelle. All right. Now, why do you think, so if this organelle is also membrane bound, it has a membrane around it. Why do you think the lysosome would need a membrane around it? So let's think about this. We said that lysosomes are carrying really, dangerous digestive enzymes that literally dissolve anything that they come into contact with. You do not want those digestive enzymes to leak out of the lysosome and get into the healthy parts of the cell. So to protect the contents of the lysosome, it will have this membrane. So again, the membrane is present around the lysosome for protection. The last organelle I want to talk about today is another organelle that is only found in plant cells, and it is the cell wall. And the cell wall is an extra protective barrier that is found around plant cells only. So, it's also found in algae, fungi, and most bacteria. So it's not found in animal cells. And it's like this rigid, hard layer that gives the plant cell or, algae, fungi, or all of these organisms, it gives them extra protection, it gives them extra support, and it provides the cell with a shape. Now, the last question, critical thinking question we want to think about today is, why do you think plant cells and not animal cells have a cell wall? Why would plant cell need a cell wall and animal cells not need one? Let's kind of circle back to the idea that plant cells need to store a lot of water, right? Their vacuoles are huge. They fill up with a lot of water. So one of the reasons why plant cells also have a cell wall is to protect the plant from bursting, because it's filling up with so much water. You don't want the plant cell to kind of get filled with so much water that it eventually kind of bursts. So plants need, why do plant cells have cell walls? Because plant cells need extra protection since they store so much water. And this is the last organelle that we are covering today.